Good evening in Bula, Fiji. Welcome back to Saqamoli Matters. I'm Finau Songo, your host. Tonight on Saqamoli Matters, we're continuing our discussions with members of the Fiscal Review Committee. Vinaka.
Richard will talk a little bit about the insights we got on education and how we
All right.
we need to know.
I can kick off. One of the interesting presentations that we got was from the United Nations Population Fund, which is reminding us that we have a young population. And I've forgotten what the numbers are, but we all know, if you look at your population curve, all of that stuff that we are used to seeing on the graphs, our population from, I think, the 0 to 19 segment is quite young. That's the population that we have to invest in now in terms of health and education, because that's the future. And when that population becomes economically productive in the next generation, they've got to be the best that they can be, well educated, healthy. I mean, for now, the number that constantly shocks me is rheumatic heart disease. One kid in 45 in Fiji, that's one kid per classroom, has rheumatic heart disease. And rheumatic heart disease is a disease of poverty. It's because people's living conditions are poor. What does that mean? We need to urgently address housing. We need to urgently address health. But then we have to educate those kids so that they become as productive as they can be. It's a rapidly changing world now. The next generation, they say, is going to have 5 careers. Not sort of stodgy old people like me who's been a lawyer all his life, right? And so people have got to become better educated and more adaptable, which means we have to invest in education. Where's the money going to come from? Once again, we don't have a choice. We've got to find it.
Thank you, Richard. Josaia, I think I wanted to ask, access to education around Fiji and access to education for vulnerable groups. Do you think it's something that we're currently doing well, or how can we improve it?
Thank you, Finau. I liked your last end of the question. What can we do about it? I think for us as a civil society organization, we recognize the need to scale up support for education. We also attest to investing into our younger population. One of the things that comes, how do we do that? Is investing in new infrastructure enough? Building new schools? How about the fact, how will we address that? Building new infrastructure, having classrooms, and yet no students is turning up consistently. The number of students that turn up and are not only physically there, but holistically present in terms of mindset and also having a clear direction. And one of the things that comes up is the support that has to go to mothers or women.
Right.
That would be the way that we would address that.
Yes.
How do we scale up our support to women?
Yes.
Not only women in the formal sector, but also specifically or especially women in the informal sector.
Yes.
Because once we increase the support to women, and then they proactively addresses issues of health services, issues of education, and definitely issues of poverty.
Yes.
That has a few of the civil society organizations have done studies around that.
Yes.
So your question of how we can talk about, build new infrastructure.
Yes.
Build new roads, increase access.
Yes.
What good will be if we have infrastructure, but the will for the people is not there.
Yes.
So the best way to tap into that will is to tap into our mothers, who are the pushers in development, in our family development, and also the front line that protects the family in that sense, that want the best for their children. That can be that layer of support, that leverage our current status, and also the one that ensure that we maintain, because they're the one who wake up in the morning, ensure that children have breakfast. It's not only for education, it's also that they have good health, that they're going to school with the right mindset, not with an empty stomach.
Yes.
But also with clean clothes.
Yes.
They iron the clothes, they make sure that my white shirt stays white, and I get the telling off if I come home and there's a little bit of stain. So skilled support for mothers and women, not only in formal sector, but informal sector, rural areas, will definitely help to address that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Josaia, I hear you loud and clear, and I think as we're now transitioning into a very, very important and much deeper mindset issues, other than just building shiny new things, building infrastructure, and that's a perfect segue into the next segment. Welcome back to the show. We were just talking about the importance of education and the fact that we have a lot of young people as a percentage of our overall population. And this conversation is so critical because we were just talking about infrastructure before. The important point was made that yes, we can build classrooms, but we also need the students to come into those schools with the right mindset and the right support from families to make sure that the students succeed. And of course, there's also the point that was made that it's important that when we look at classrooms and students who are going to school, that we look after their health, their minds, so that when they come to school, they're ready to succeed and to be the best that they can be. And this important point was just made on the role of mothers in homes and the role of women in society. So I'd like to go deeper into that and then throw a question into the mix. Why does that responsibility only sit with mothers? Why can we not look at the family so that both heads of the families, and whatever family model it is, right? That both, first, yes, absolutely, we absolutely acknowledge that, but I'm really interested in this concept of the family is responsible, and how do we make sure that both mothers and fathers, fulfilling this responsibility of supporting families and sending kids to school, like what you said. From an FCOSS perspective, what are some of the challenges around households in Fiji that you think is important if we're going to have these honest conversations about what we need to do around social transformation?
It's not an easy one to answer.
Yeah.
I might have come out so loud about support to women, but that doesn't mean that it's only women that we need to support. When we provide support to mothers, it's not necessarily meaning, or women, it's not necessarily meaning only the support to that unit in a family. This definitely have to be support to the supporting system around that strongest unit. The support to the breadwinners of the family as well. If the father is the sole breadwinner, I'm just making an assumption now. But however, if you increase the support, if you increase the capacity of the support system, of the supporting unit around women, which include increase in markets, increase access in your support to the men, to support the mothers. And I'm also being mindful that we have single parents as well,
yes.
Who played a role of mothers as well for parents, single fathers. But the support system around that is important as well.
Yes.
We've been talking about family-based approach in most of our intervention.
Yeah.
I think it's also important enough for us from a civil society organization. When we talk about economy, it's something that is kind of foreign in our language, but we normally bring it down to the transitioning into more a people-centered economy, where we soften the the need for all this shiny infrastructure, but more on answering the question why.
Yeah.
Why do we need new schools? Why do we need all this infrastructure? And not just another grandstanding way of leveraging the services that we provide.
Yes.
So when we build schools, it's because of responding to a need that is in the community. That's definitely simple economic, 101 that everyone understands. But the support for women does not only mean support just for that single unit. It's definitely support also to the surroundings ecosystem that provides a better service and support for the women as well in that sense.
Perfect. Just on that, so we put our kids through the education system, and then at the end, in the difficult economic environment that we're facing, what jobs do they have to choose from? And this is an economic reality not only in Fiji, but really all over the world. Unemployment, a lot of young people who have come out of school or who have, very well qualified, have gone for vocational training or tertiary qualifications. What do we do about jobs? And what's the report recommending around creating these opportunities for our young people to find employment and means of livelihoods as they enter into that phase of their lives?
Well, the report doesn't have any specific recommendations around jobs specifically, but what is evident from it is that the world is changing, and so it's very difficult in today's world, two things really, very difficult in today's world to imagine what job your 5-year-old is going to have in 15 years' time. The other important part of it is that Fiji has a very high propensity for tertiary education, right? And for some reason we have moved towards this tertiary style of learning and foregone the trades and the things that we can probably build much bigger workforce in that has a greater demand. You try to get builders. We've got imported builders coming in because we don't have enough in that category. But we've got lots of graduates who probably aren't working in the field that they're qualified in. Yeah. And so it's about finding the value in the work that we do and finding what will work in a country like ours.
Yes.
One of the things, because I work in the tax space, one of the things I like to see if we were doing tax incentives, for example, is that we have these economic goals in the incentives that we build. So whether it's how many jobs are you creating in this? What sort of foreign exchange are we getting from this sort of work? So those milestones that allow us to measure what the benefit of the things that we're giving away in the process.
Yeah.
A couple of the things that we touched on in the report, Vina. The first was MSMEs, and we've said to the government, you've got to put more attention to that. MSMEs, we think, employ more than 50% of people in Fiji. And if you're talking about formal education, as Lisa says, and formal employment, that's not the way the world is going.
Yeah.
We have the gig economy these days.
Yeah.
We have, much more outsourcing and so independent contracting. And so it's the MSMEs where I think we have to concentrate, because they create the most employment, but they also have the most impact. If you're a small business person, you have the opportunity to grow your business the way you want to earn more money the way you want to, which you not necessarily get in a formal job. So MSMEs, there are two areas that we wanted government to have specific. MSMEs. The other is in the indigenous economic sector. And I don't know how much time we've got in this section, but I'll come back to it.
Yep. Well, we've just heard about the importance of having the correct support systems around families to ensure that our children thrive, and the importance of the family unit. And on the issue of education, it's clear that we will need to relook at our educational system and where we've traditionally put our emphasis to ensure that we have the right types of jobs and also the right qualifications for those jobs that our economy needs to grow. And that's a perfect segue into our next episode, and join us soon for that. Welcome back to the show. We were just talking about education, and on this issue of education, one of the most controversial topics is this issue of scholarships and loans. Richard, would you be able to share what the committee's thinking is on that?
So for now, we came to the scholarship and loans piece a little bit late in the report. But it was important to us because obviously there is a concern that there's $600 million on the government, on the TELS loan book that is out there. And the political imperative, because that's a commitment of the government as a part of the coalition agreement, is that that's going to be written off. And so a whole lot of people are saying, how can you do that? You know, that's a huge loss of value. Digging into it a little bit deeper, we were a little bit concerned to learn that really that's not an asset at all, because it's not paying anything back. The government's recovery of money from TELS, that $600 million book of debts, is about $5 million a year. That's all it is. And as we dug a little bit deeper, we were a bit concerned because it didn't seem to be very clear to us how TELS, whether TELS had a strategy to really recover this money. So in the scheme of things, I think we need to have a complete relook at how we are funding tertiary education, because I think the TELS scheme has not worked particularly well. I think the money has gone towards educating a lot of people, and I think Lisa talked about this, a lot of graduates, but not necessarily with the skills that are necessary for today's economy. But more importantly, TELS, which is meant to be a loan scheme, which is meant to ensure that the money comes back to fund more education for more students, not working. And so there's a whole rethink needed for that, because education is important, tertiary education is undoubtedly important, but we just haven't gotten it right.
This is a very important point. I mean, and you know, for students who are beneficiaries of these loan schemes that are listening in tonight, there are students that have repaid their loans, and there are students who have loans that are current. And so if we say, talk about loan forgiveness, you know, where's the issue of equity, particularly around, you know, students whose families have supported them, who have had to work to repay their loans. I mean, do we, you know, have any thoughts around that? Did you receive any submissions in this regard?
I think there were some submissions expressing concern about the write-off of TELS and the unequal situation that created. But for now, I think whichever way you go with that, there's going to be inequity. There's only so much money, and there's a lot of demand. And I don't think, because remember, at the same time as we were lending $600 million, we were also funding, I think it was about $260 million in TOPPERS scholarships. Now, in the end, equity means that the people who do not have access to education because their families do not have money, they are the ones who must have priority. It's all very well to say we're all equal here and we should all be funded, but we can't afford that. So when you can't afford, you know, to do everything, you must focus on what you can do. And the priority must be for the people who cannot afford education. If your family can afford to educate you, well, I'm sorry, that's what your family has got to do. If your family can't afford to educate you, that's where the government must step in and help. Because we can't do everything. We've only got limited funds.
And Josaia, do you have any insights on that from an FCOSS perspective on access to education, and those who can afford should pay, and those who can't afford is where we really should be directing our assistance to?
Yeah, I think Richard have covered that, like equitable access. We have families who can afford, and yet they are enjoying toppers, while we have families who cannot afford, yet are forced to go to TELS. With the equity in that. We do not have any clear response to that. However, our work comes back to the importance of ensuring that whatever ways we, strategies that we employ, not only as government but as development partners, that it has to ensure the safety and the protections of the vulnerable members of the community and the at-risk community.
Yes.
If they can afford to pay, why not?
Yes.
And how can we leverage or elevate the level of access to those who cannot afford?
Yes.
I think that's where we will. My best response to that is about equitable access, and not always about equality, but equitability.
And as we wrap up this particular segment, this is a very important concept, equity versus equitable access, and the concept of things that are free. Free, it's not only just for education, health. Free, the concept of free is that it's actually a bit of a misnomer, because nothing is free. Providing those services is actually not free, because we have to pay for people to provide those services. So there is a need for transformation in the mindset of what's free and what's not. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next segment. Thank you. Welcome back to the show. We were just talking about how important education is, and how important the concept of equitable education is. Now, at the end of the day, why are we getting an education? It's so that we can get employment and create livelihoods for ourselves, where we can be independent and afford to be able to look after ourselves and our families. But the issue is, there's just not enough jobs out there for all the young people that are coming out of our education system. What do we do about that? And this is a real issue for all our youths that are vibrant, energetic, and they've got so much to give. And what do we do around that? Is it only the government's responsibility to create those jobs? And we've discussed that the world is changing, society is changing, the way we work is changing. The days of working in the same job for 30 years is no longer the case. And so, yes, the world is changing, and our society is also changing. So how do we, as a nation, households and individuals, also adjust to this change, given the very challenging times that we have in front of us? And that leads us to this conversation that we're going to talk about businesses, particularly small to medium enterprises and micro enterprises, and how do we create an enabling environment that allows each small business to thrive, small to big businesses to thrive, so that we can create opportunities for ourselves in these challenging times.
So, we talked a little bit earlier on about the two priority areas that we asked the government to focus on. One was MSMEs, and I think we talked a little bit about that in terms of how the education system must make people adaptive, and how I think for many people, being in business for themselves is possibly their best option, as opposed to formal employment. The other big area that we asked the government to focus on is indigenous enterprise and investment. And one of the presentations that we had as the committee was from, I think, Ministry of Itoke Affairs, Fijian Holdings, Center for Appropriate Technology Development, and Itoke Trust Fund Board. And they came to us and they said, we don't need money from the government. We have the money. The money has been invested, the money has accumulated.
Mhm.
We have capital. And so we can go back and we can go into the community. We can begin to develop, resource-based industries. We don't need the money, we've got it. What the government has got to do is provide the enabling environment to do that. The committee report has a chapter on the things that we need to do to make doing business easier. And, there's always a lot of talk about that. But there's a couple of things I think that are important that we talk about, because we are talking about how government taxes and spends.
Yeah.
One of the things that interested me was, the government's supposed to be in a mode of so-called fiscal consolidation. It's supposed to be cutting its costs. That's great, except that you can't just cut costs across the board. You have to be a little bit smarter about it. An example, the Department of Environment and the Department of Town and Country Planning. Now those are two places where if you talk to developers, people who build buildings, you talk to FRA because they've got to build bridges, the people who build our physical capital, they're constantly complaining that the Department of Environment doesn't move fast enough, it can take months, Department of Town and Country Planning and local government don't give you your approvals. Well, if we looked a little bit at that, in the last 4 years, the budgets of those two departments have been cut by more than 50%. So what's actually happening is that they have fewer and fewer resources to deal with more and more demand.
Yeah.
So we haven't been very clever about improving those kinds of regulations. Whereas if we invested well and improved the resources for those departments, improved the turnaround times, we'd get stuff built much faster.
Yeah.
We'd be able to create the capital that we need to grow the economy much faster. So once again, it's down to government and making sure that the spending is smart. It's
Yeah.
like the maintenance, it's like the investment in the social, what we call the demographic dividend that we talked about.
Yeah.
We've just got to be a lot more clever about how we spend our money.
Yeah.
Yes, the public are entitled to value for money, and we have to
Yeah.
cut expenditure where we can, but there are other places where we actually have to increase expenditure
Yeah.
because that will improve our economic growth.
Yeah. Absolutely. And on that issue of cutting budgets and the allocation of scarce resources to parts of government, how do we, what about education and health as biggest consumers of top two budget lines? How would we spend smarter in that area? The question that'll be on everyone's mind is a controversial one about human resources within government. How do we discuss that? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, our response to that, or more like our reaction to that, would be, yes, we can increase budget. Yes, we can allocate more. How about the capacity to implement?
Yes.
When we talk about capacity, it's not only in terms of number, but also in terms of standard and quality of services produced.
Yes.
When we conduct our PFM, or Public Finance Management Advocacy, one of the things that comes back to us was the importance to monitor the measures that are in place for us to ensure that not only it is spent, but it's spent efficiently, and the effectiveness of that spending. So it brings back to, do we have the right human resources in the market? Not only that we fill all the position, but the outputs from this position that we're filling. And also at times that one of the things that comes back, do we have the environment? Is the environment conducive enough for us to produce that standard of work that we require? And also the processes of having that. We've just talked about, sometimes, we cut the budget and the increase in demand. Those are some of the processes that need to be revisited or need to be brought to the table for discussion.
Absolutely. Well, we have to wrap up the segment now, and I'd like to give each one of you an opportunity to maybe say a few words that you'd like to leave with the people of Fiji out of our discussion today. Richard, maybe we start with yourself?
All right, I'll try and be quick because I've talked quite a lot already now, but I think the message that I would like to leave is that we have to be a bit more realistic about our economic situation. But if we act now, it will get better. We can improve. We can grow our economy. You know, there is so much potential here. We can make it work, and we can improve our economy, we can improve our incomes, we can improve health, education. The opportunity is there. But there is just a little bit of pain that we have to go through right now in order to adjust our expectations and get the spending right and get the revenue right.
Great. Josaia?
Maybe for the citizen.
Yes, please.
For our viewers, just the reminder of us to be active citizen. Educate ourselves on issues. Seek more advices from the expert, I'll say, and also the support system around us. And one of the most crucial part of being an active citizen is to, in the area of public finance, is to follow your money. If you're going to increase VAT, if the government is going to increase tax, if you educate yourself, but don't stop there. Follow your money. That comes in many ways. It can simply asking the government more questions. Can follow up. Doesn't have to be the ministries, those who come into your community, but to actively participate in this platform, and maybe not only to the citizen but to the government as well. The trust of the citizens on you, and the issues of how do you spend that income that you're going to collect from the people, and also giving back information so that you keep that trust intact.
Yes.
Only if there's trust, then the people are willing to give.
Great. Lisa?
Okay. Richard and Josaia have covered most of it, but I think my reflection is that from the fiscal review report, there's a lot of work to be done, but it's not insurmountable. When you read it, we know there's lots of things that have to be done, and as Richard said, there's lots of opportunity and promise in it. We just need to stand shoulder to shoulder in this to see our way through it, and we have to start somewhere. Right? So if we take those small steps, and they will start, the momentum will start in that. I think one of the big issues in it is around leadership. We need strong leadership in the various things that we need to do. But we also need to be purposeful in the actions that we take. So when we're talking about, allocating budget to something, be purposeful about what it is and what are we going to get from that spend. Is it worth our while? And there will be trade-offs in all the things that we have to do because we have limited resources. So being conscious of that as we make those decisions each year and as we go forward. The fiscal review report is a long-term report. It's not a next month we're going to fix everything. This has you've got to take a long-term view on it. And so if we start making those steps, we will get to where we want to go. There is opportunity. We know that. That's why we're all here. And so we need to make that step together. That's my message.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's Saqamoli Matters. Please join us again tomorrow at the same time, same place on FBC TV to discuss national budget matters that are important to you. Vinaka.